Alright guys, how's it going? Sting here. I just thought I'd do a quick little video while we're watching Bitcoin Nuke right now, and I think this is a really good time to be watching the DeltaPrint candles and just kind of show a quick example. So I'll do a full video about it later, but we might do a little snippet here and see if I can narrate some things that are going on and show you some trades that I would take. So right now we're basically just watching BTC. This is a 4-hour chart on the left, 30-minute on the right, and a footprint, DeltaPrint on the upper right hand side, and we're looking at BTC pushing the value area low on a weekly basis. So this is where the DeltaPrints kind of come into play. You want to be looking at them at key areas. So up here, value area high, right here, value area low, again, right, value area low, POC. Like these are the kind of inflection points that you want to be using a DeltaPrint at, because that's when you're going to be getting the most useful signals. So right now we can see kind of BTC snapping that low. We can see we already had a lot of big sells right in here, the 70 mil, the 50 mil, another 37 million right here. So what we're looking for right here is either continued selling, right, and a big aggressive move down, and we'd be taking aggressive short trades on this, you know, with a stop a fair distance away for the breakout short. Or if we see some big selling down here and a nice snapback and a nice trap in here and a reversion and maybe a reclaim of weekly open, then we'd probably be looking for longs back up to this POC area. So right now, we're just gonna kind of keep an eye on it, right? Look, we just had another 60 mil, right? So we have these big kind of orders coming in here. And if we kind of see sustained selling and big DeltaPrints kind of coming down without a significant snapback and buyback, then we can probably assume that this is gonna keep breaking down, at which point I would be looking at these levels down here. Right, I'd be looking at about 58 to 57.5 if we do significantly break this, but I'm going to keep an eye on this and see if we don't get a snapback and a trap here. And like we talk about, these things aren't always textbook, okay? Like, it's not going to stop right at this level. We could have a deviation of below. We could snap right through it. But right now we can see this 55 or 57 million aggressive buying now that bought out that dip, okay? So this is a good sign of someone coming in, stepping and defending this value area low level right here that we're talking about on a weekly basis, right? So if we can do something along these lines of, you know, come up here, kind of spend some time here, and then reclaim weekly open and go like that, that's a trade I'd be looking to take, right? I'm not looking to catch the exact bottom, but I want to be looking for a reclaim of weekly. And I'm not going to be putting my stop right below this wick, right? Because we could very well get another flush down. But I'll be putting my stop, you know, below here, below here. Again, other areas of liquidity that could be swept later in this move down if this isn't the bottom. But you don't want to be putting it right at a little wick low just because you saw one little trap, right? That's just what I'm trying to say. So, okay, so we've seen a decent buyback here. It's kind of snapped back below, and we had 57 mil kind of defend that and lift those offers back into that level. And now we're just going to keep an eye. We're going to see if there's continued buying, continued selling, and see if this can actually defend this level here. So I've kind of talked about two scenarios that I'm looking for, just so we're clear. The long scenarios would be a reclaim of weekly open, in which case I'd be looking for a scalp up to this POC, the point of control from last week. And the downside scenarios would be a clean smash of this value area low, in which case we'd be looking for something like this, and then we'd head down lower towards the this structure right in here, and then this naked POC that comes in about 57K. So I think if this level doesn't hold right here, this area right in here between the naked POC and this little volume node in here is probably going to be a good area of support. So that's where I'd be looking for the next trade opportunity if this doesn't hold here. But like I said, we're just going to let this develop and see how it goes. just zooming in a bit more on the slower time frame chart so we can see. Starting to get a bit of a buyback here. You can kind of see it on this DeltaPrint up here as well. I do like this climax in volume here. I'm not saying that this is the bottom, but this is a good indication that we're going to get a short-term kind of relief here, right? The climax in volume, you see this big spike, aggressive sweep down. You have these traps here, multiple big sells, right? 1, 2, 3. And we were watching it live, right? We saw this trap happen, and then we saw this buyer come in and defend that. So those are all, you know, initial signs of buyers stepping in. It's also important to have both scenarios planned out, right? Like I said, I'm not looking for one trade or the other. I'm just going to see what the market tells us, see what we see on the DeltaPrint, see if we see any traps that indicate one or the other setup very clearly, or aggressive selling, right, if it's the downside. This is where it's also kind of important not to rush into trades. I know everyone wants to long the dip and catch the exact bottom or the exact top, right? But waiting a little bit longer, seeing what, you know, the chart tells us, what the market's telling us, what the flow is telling us. Those are all important things, right? Patience. You can scalp in and out of here 1,000 times, but that'll kill you on fees if you don't know exactly what you're looking for. And right now we haven't really confirmed one way or another that this level is going to hold or it's not. So we'll stay patient. This is also probably a good area of I know there's not a single print here, but you can kind of see it on the chart. This is probably an area of inefficiency in here, right in there. So, you know, we could be watching that area for downside targets as well if we do end up taking the short. We just want to keep in mind as well that we do have about 10 minutes till the hourly close, so we want to see some significant buying or some sort of buyback around that if we're going to get the long scenario, otherwise this is looking like it might come down. And that is still about an hour before daily close as well. We can see some more cells printing in, right? That 70 mil is now 90. We've seen another 13 mil print there. We're gonna see if this 57 mil can defend that. And we saw that delta shift right there, right? From 57 down to 40. It's about 17 mil more in cells right there. We're gonna see, are they gonna step back in? Are they gonna defend these lows again? Right, is it gonna flush right through it with heavy selling? This is kind of the inflection point that we wanna see. More buyers stepping in here. See that 40 ticked back up to 53, right? So we can see almost the same amount of cells that took that down, starting to step right back in right there. You can kind of see how these big players tend to defend these levels. If they bought it once up again, they're going to try to defend that. They don't want to be pushed offside, right? So if that is a new fresh long that's opened, he's going to want to try to keep that above him. So that was pretty interesting, right? On a low time frame, a lot of people would have been shaken out or have gotten in their longs too early and stopped out on the second wick if you could have stopped just below one of those lows. Right, this is why we want to see the absorption. We want to see the flow develop. We want to see how the buyers and sellers are interacting at this level. And this is kind of what also goes into what makes a candlestick, right? This is a really good example of what's happening beyond just the candle. You see the candle flick up and down, but seeing the buys and sells interact with each other, seeing how people are playing this tug of war game at specific areas of interest kind of adds another element to it. For better or worse, for some people, you know, it's too complicated and it goes over their head, which is fine. But if you can really understand and feel out the flow, the nitty-gritty of it can be one of your biggest assets. And that's also saying that the flow itself is not going to be the same every time, right? Every breakdown, every defending, every sweep, all of that, they aren't going to look the same. But you start to notice patterns, you start to notice market regimes, how they affect that. And those are kind of things you want to be taking notes of. So we're taking another pass of the lows here. We can see another 15 mil sell printed right above the 55. Oh, and that's coming back down, so he's eating into that. It's probably just a recalculation of the candles, so that 15 that we saw is combined with that 50. Alright, so it looks like that same amount, right, that got shaved off on the last one stepped right back in, and we can see the buyers now stepping right back in here. And it's aggressive, it's fast, right? They're defending that level. And this is kind of what makes these explosive moves, right? We can see this buildup of positioning on both sides, the selling and the buying, whether it's pukes or fresh positions opening. When you get this tug of war, you get this buildup of positions like this, one way or another when we move, one side is going to have to puke, one side is going to have to unwind, right? And that's, you know, we could have just seen an unwinding of positions, which the funding kind of pointed to that. But now on the downside, if these fresh longs that have opened up here or are trying to defend this level, if they get run over, that's basically going to be the fuel for another leg down. This is the hourly close coming up right here. Probably going to see something come up, you know, one way or another, probably a quick move just on the open. Usually try not to be opening or closing positions right on the hour, right? Because you're going to get kind of, you know, bots hitting last second, a lot of people opening and closing on candle closes, just a lot of random stuff, right? Usually a couple seconds, couple minutes will kind of save you either a few points of slippage each way or kind of just show you what the true direction of the market is going to be if someone's kind of just pulling it really quickly. And this usually happens around bigger closes. daily, hourly, 4-hour, weekly. Unless your strategy is specifically geared towards trading the close, right? Trading the manipulation around that, because that is a strategy as well. And now we can kind of see after the hourly close, there's a resumption of the trend that was kind of happening before. So we saw that aggressive buying happening, and now we're kind of seeing a resumption of that right after the quick shake out of the hourly close. Right, so that's kind of what I was referring to earlier, is we don't want to necessarily quick react, like, oh shit, hourly closed, let's dump it all because it's, you know, has a quick twitch down. Give it some time, let it breathe. If you're, you know, this patient, this far along, you don't want to puke it on something like that. And so also the reason why I'm leaning towards longs in this scenario is, yeah, obviously the macro picture of Bitcoin, but if we think about what value ranges are, right, we expect price to stay in a range, stay within the previous action more often than it does break out. And while Bitcoin is a heavily trending asset, you know, it still does tend to respect these value areas. It respects these ranges really well. So while it could very well break out, it's just you always want to lean and you don't want to get too overzealous of a breakout well before, because, you know, on the same thing on the upside, right, on the same thing here, excuse me, if you had been aggressive into this value area high, you would have gotten smacked, right? And the same thing, you could have gotten smacked back there and all of that. So looking for supporting flow, looking for these kind of things at the area to give you that confidence, whether to step in or to kind of sit tight or play the mean reversion or play the breakout. That's kind of what, you know, the order flow or the DeltaPrint or the lower time frame price action, there's a lot of different ways you can do it, right? But this is just the whole goal of that. See some more aggressive buying stepping in here, some spot bids. Now, if we're looking at this from a pure price action point of view, we could be looking at something like this, right? You want to see this trigger. See something like this, right? So if you're looking for a price action trigger, it could look something like that. This is a pretty good flow trigger right here. I would say this is probably worth stabbing along somewhere in here soon. You can see this aggressive buying continue. If you see this eclipsing, see price eclipsing the previous selling, the previous big pukes, that's a good sign that you want to be starting to get long or looking for that kind of scenario that we talked about. So while I was saying earlier you want to be waiting for the weekly open reclaim, that's probably going to be your ultimate confirmation. If you're really aggressive and you want to start scalping, you can start kind of dipping your toes in here. And obviously, like I said, you don't want to be keeping a tight stop right below the lows, but you want to be fairly quick to invalidate that if we do start puking and we do start seeing that, you know, that flow that you saw as the trigger. If that's negating that, then, well, that's not really a valid trade anymore then, right? So those are all kinds of things. While you don't have to have your stop right below the low, those are all things you should be thinking about while you're in the trade. How is this trade developing? So yeah, this is probably a pretty good area to take a scalp long where I'd be looking for. So let's go ahead and do that. Take a quick look at the 30-minute and the profiles again. Right, so we had a decent sweep into this level. We're kind of still holding this level on the wicks. Seems decent. We do have some single prints that filled in here into the POC, and this would be the target for this trade, is the POC. I don't really want to be looking for more than that. Yeah, it could come up here, right, up to 61.9, right? We see this little gap in here, but that's all this trade is looking for. You're not looking to take this all the way back to all-time highs. You could try to even take it to the other side of the range if it's, you know, you're really aggressive, but this is pretty much it. We saw this nice dip below weekly open. We want to see a reclaim, and we want to see continuation into POC. There it is. There's the aggressive buying. Now we want to see that continue. We want to see that being held. 25 mil there, right? That's pretty good size, and it's all relative, right? We saw 56 mil at the lows. We saw these decent pukes, but you know, you see it in here. This is good buying now. Like I said, we'll do a DeltaPrint video just specifically on DeltaPrint, what it is, how to use it, all that kind of stuff. But I thought this was a really good example and a good time to just kind of show a live kind of trade taking of all the tools coming together and what I'd be looking for in these kind of scenarios. Because, you know, a lot of people are panicking. They see a huge big red candle and they're like, oh shit, sell everything, right? But if you can understand the flow, you understand the scenarios of what's going on, you understand what the alts are doing, yeah, these can be some of the best trades or the best risk reward opportunities. And there it is, another 10 mil right there, right? So we see these aggressive buyers now stepping and lifting the offers. This is exactly what we want to see. Back down a bit. Saw 4 million get shaved off that 10. Seeing that tug of war a bit again. So we saw it smack down a bit now, right? We're starting to see sells starting to step in again after that big flurry of aggressive buying. This is pretty much where we were looking at to get long. And again, we saw that 24 mil originally that kind of stepped in and defended again at that level, right? We don't know if it's the same person, but we tend to see these big orders get respected or defended, or be key inflection points on the lower time frames on the microstructure. So we can kind of see buys coming in again. We can see that bullish delta on the print. We're just going to keep watching this up until it comes up until weekly open, right? Because we're not, while we took a small long here, we're not saying that this is by any chance out of the woods or this trade is still good, right? So we just have to keep monitoring it. We have to keep an eye on it, see how this develops, see how the delta develops, see how Bitcoin kind of reacts to these levels. Yep, and again, same level, right? The same kind of action that we've been seeing around that 20 mil that chipped down, that came back up, that push and pull right around in there. Saw that level get defended yet again. We saw more buyers come in. We see that new 6 mil, right? This is also a good reason to see, to be watching delta candles as they form, right? You don't need to be trading every tick or staring at every single tick, but you miss something when you see the delta candles print afterwards. And yeah, you can still see the traps, yeah, you can still see the buys, but you don't know exactly in what order they happened or how many times price traded over those delta levels, right? So after this candle closes, yeah, we may see that 20 million there, but we didn't really see the full story about how it chipped down to 10 million, how the buyers stepped back in, how they defended that, and how now at the end it's getting pushed back down again, right? With that 8 million, that pushed it down from added another 5 million sells on top. So yeah, while these candles are great, looking at them in hindsight and in the past as well, you just add another layer of it when you look at them real time, and you're kind of understanding the context of the story of what's kind of happening in between these candles and in between the delta. So now what we wouldn't want to see is if we just don't make a new high here and we just continue rolling over, right? We don't want to see something like this. That's kind of at what point we have to start cutting our long and looking for the opposite side of the trade. But again, as long as we can defend these levels, right? And this is what kind of gives those clear points of what's breaking. Is like, yeah, we can wait for this short, we can wait for the breakdown, but if this buyer goes, right, like that's a pretty clear sign that this is, unless someone new steps in and completely swipes it up, we have our kind of levels defined now. We have our areas of interest defined of what we're looking at, who we're looking at to defend this thing. And those are the bonuses of flow, right? Like I said, you don't want to be putting your stop right below that low because it's very easy to get wicked out, but it gives you more context, it gives you more ideas of what a risk-defined trade should be, what invalidation looks like. we're below that 21 mil, right? So now we can kind of see what happens if we're going to start unraveling this pretty quickly because we're below that and he's no longer defending. And someone stepped in with 5 mil buys. All right, so they're clearly defending this level. There's clearly someone who doesn't want this to go down, or you know, they're holding this up. Actually gonna have to end the video here, but I will post what actually happens after and we can kind of recap this trade later. But I would really pay attention and look back about what's happening here and see how this kind of develops, because this is a pretty key inflection point, and whatever happens here, you'll be able to see it on the delta. It'll tell a very clear story. Like I said, you won't be able to get that extra layer of what's happening in the moment, but you'll at least be able to see, you know, what exactly happened, who won, what the overwhelming buyer selling was looking like. But I think this was a really good example of when to look at delta, why to look at delta, and what kind of tip-offs we can see at these key inflection points. Thanks, guys.